Being present is probably one of the solutions to anything going on in the world today. I mean, we might think that we need drastic change, but actually the only thing we need is personal change. That's it.
Thank you so much, Lou, for being here today. You are the founder of the World Happiness Foundation and the World Happiness Fest. And your goal is to have billions of people free, conscious, and happy by 2050. And I love to see you embody this and to conceptualize it and execute such a grand and vital mission for humanity. And it reminds me of this quote from Dr. Wayne Dyer. He said, "Heaven on earth is a choice we make, not a place we find." So thank you for reminding all of us that happiness is a choice. And I want to start by talking about those three important words: freedom, consciousness, and happiness. And to people who might not have dabbled into meditation or mindfulness, freedom might evoke this idea of free speech or the right to vote. How would you explain freedom to people who are new to what you're doing in the World Happiness Foundation?
Well, thank you so much for this invitation. I'm so glad that we are walking this journey together. And yes, those three words are I would say are the tenets, are the core elements of something that I call fundamental peace. Because in the end, when we are free, we are conscious and we are happy, we get to a state of fundamental peace. But if we start with freedom, as you say, it could be freedom of speech, it could be many types of freedom. The way I think everybody is going to understand is when we link this to fear. So it's freedom from fear. It's freedom from suffering. It's actually free to be. So when we go deeper into what creates fear, there's so many reasons, so many, and everybody at some point, not just in life, but through every hour, is going to go through some states of uncertainty. And some people are going to be understanding uncertainty as a temporary state. That's something that comes and goes. But for some people, actually, it's not. For some people, they really attach to that fear. And it could be fear of death. It could be fear of losing something, fear of being alone, fear of flying and having an issue on the plane. There's so many reasons. And this is part of human nature. This is something that you understand when you go deeper into the science and the chemistry of our bodies and our brains. And you know that if you're able to understand what brings you into a state of fear or uncertainty or anxiety, then once you have the techniques and the skills to be free from that state, that creates a different state that allows you to evolve, allows you to create anabolic energy, which is an energy of creation. And that state is very, very important. So I think that freedom in this case, the way we frame it, is freedom to be. And normally you're free to be when you understand where your fears are coming from.
Yes. I think a lot about it in terms of ego, freeing yourself from the egoic mind. And fear is connected to ego. That's where fear comes from. And I love this idea of talking about freedom in this way. And that's really the reason why this podcast is called the Calm and Free Podcast. And so I think we are so mind aligned there in terms of really wanting people to be free to be, as you said, free from the egoic mind. And the word consciousness too, you would think 20 years ago, no one was really talking about consciousness. It was woo-woo in a way. And now you hear people from all industries, all realms, quantum physics, medicine, neuroscience, psychology. Everyone is using this word consciousness. That's another one, though, that has to be defined in a way for a layperson to understand that. How would you describe it to someone who might not know how you are putting it into context?
Yes, and something that we all know is that when you go deeper into a space and the path to freedom, we are using words and we put labels to things that cannot be described with words and labels. And this is part of human evolution. We choose and we attach to words, but it's like feelings or sensations. There are more than 300 feelings, but we actually cannot name even 5. We can say sadness and we can say joy and we can say anger, but it's very difficult then to move into disgust, for example. So there are more than 300. If we look at Dan Kahneman's map of emotions. When we think of consciousness, this is a very special space because there are many definitions as well. And some definitions link this to our mind going beyond the brain. But some definitions link this to the whole universe, is the whole. So actually one of the definitions I love is that consciousness is all the time, always, every moment, is the whole. But it's very difficult to understand because if we think with a rational mind, if we think with what does it mean the whole, maybe the whole is the room where I am, but actually you think the whole is going deeper into quantums, into matter that is energy at some point, and then you link this to the whole universe or the universe, because there might be hundreds of universes, then everything gets super complicated. So I think that in this case, what is very important is that we understand that the more aware we are, the more mindful we are, the more we are going to transcend. So for me, consciousness is important to expand and evolve. So when we are free to be, then we use consciousness to expand and evolve. And when we say expand and evolve, it might be from out-of-body experiences to actually being a better father or being a better mother. But we understand the what for. I think there are always 3 levels on many, many things. In consciousness, for me, there are 3 fundamental levels. The level of awareness is like, I know what's happening. So I see around, I see things happening. The second level is the level of I know why things are happening. And when you go into the why, then you get into the mindfulness state. But then there's a third level, and which is much more related to the whole, to the always, to the all the time, which is transcendence. And when you get into a level of transcendence, you know what for. So things are happening for a reason, and you understand. And you can understand that not just from a rational point of view, you feel it, you are it. So the I am that I am, I think is the ultimate evolution of consciousness, because you know that you are everything and everything is you. But what is true is that unless you're in a higher state of visualization and understanding, it's very, very difficult to explain this in a 85-90% of the population. That's why we have to use the right words. We use the right techniques and the right tools. But consciousness is a beautiful space. So for example, we just created a chair on contemplative science. And what you do with this chair, and this is with the University of Zaragoza in Spain, what you do with this chair is to understand consciousness from different angles, from a biological point of view, from a physics point of view, mathematical point of view, from a psychological point of view, because there are so many ways to get into the hole. So how do you get into the hole and the always? Well, you have to explore different ways. And how do you translate this into somebody like a caregiver, somebody who has been taking care of their family member for years and they didn't have 30 minutes for themselves over the last 15 years, as they are just in the US 53 million of these caregivers? Well, the way they are really going to understand is when they have some time to connect deeply with themselves and hear that they are not alone, even when they are taking care of people. So there's different ways to translate, and what we try to do from the foundation is to find the right words, the right techniques for everybody to understand and to practice.
Yes. It is a hard, it was a hard question. You know, Eckhart Tolle talks about it as enlightenment or consciousness happens the moment you are able to be the observer of your thoughts, be the person who can disassociate, detach from your thinking mind. And that allows the silence and the stillness that you're talking about. And it really is a very beautiful thing. And I want to get back to that later on. I want to talk about that third word, happy. You so beautifully talked about this as the idea that we shouldn't want to be happy. We should want to be happiness. We shouldn't want to be kind. We should be kindness. Please expand on this very profound and beautiful way of thinking about these words.
Yes, I mean that it sounds different actually when you pronounce that, and when you say that, it already creates an expansion. So I think that, and this is why probably the word happy is not, it creates some dissonance for some people, because it's like, well, you're not going to tell me that I should be happy because that's into my personal space, right?
Yes.
And we know that. And actually right now, we know that there are a lot of sad people with very happy pictures on Instagram.
Yes.
In this case, why happiness is so critical, and why is part of this triad of tenets and principles in order to achieve fundamental peace. And it's exactly because of what you said, because it's not about being happy, it's about being happiness. It's about sharing. So when you actually use the ness, consciousness, kindness, happiness, you are embodying. So the embodiment part is a critical part. So some people don't know that we store so much memory in our muscles. So we have muscle memory. We have a big trauma. I'm based in Florida, and we have a big trauma with this building collapsing, and more than 100 survivors in this case, 100 families have been treated directly, but then we have more than 100 victims. What you realize is that the moment you have a trauma, you store that suffering and that trauma in your muscles, in your body. So embodiment is not just for trauma, it's actually for happiness. Embodiment is for kindness. Embodiment is for anything. Normally we say walk the talk. When you are walking the talk, you are basically embodying your talk. So it's not about just saying, I believe that everything's are gonna be fantastic. Well, actually you are living a fantastic life. And even if it's not fantastic, you know how to deal with that. So I think that this is the beautiful part of happiness. When you go then into research and the impact that happiness can have for your health, for your creativity, for your innovation at work, for the expansion of your success, is just remarkable. So this is very important. And some people say, well, I'm gonna wait for something to make me happy. It's
Yes.
actually all the research, and you know that starts is the opposite. No,
Yes.
let's understand what are the activators of my happiness. Let's go into those activators, because chocolate and eating chocolate is an activator of happiness for many people, but not for others. Being in nature is another activator, but it doesn't mean that that's happiness. It's an activator of happiness. So when we embrace, we embody, and we walk the talk, that's when we are in the path for two fundamental peace.
Yes. You've also talked about this word, radiating happiness. It's when you embody, you actually are automatically sharing, right? Because we are radiating this happiness, this kindness in the world. And it really is such a beautiful thing to share in that way of embodiment. I want to turn to your work with at Davos and with many political leaders, spiritual leaders. You so beautifully connect business with mental well-being, and you do it because you've seen it. You've seen both sides, and this is why I think you bring so much to the table in this dialogue. You know, at Davos that leaders look at success through the lens of productivity, economic development, growth. Countries measure their success based on GDP, based on consumer demand. Companies measure their growth based on market cap and revenue growth. Everything is about growth. There is a wonderful book called Sapiens. You've probably read it, by Noah Yuval Harari. Yuval Noah Harari, excuse me. He says that we have so much economic growth, so much power we've accumulated over so many years. But in actuality, we're probably not as happy as we were in the Stone Age. So I'd love to hear from you on how we can change this dialogue and change the measurement for our happiness. And I know you've talked about something called Happytalism. And I love it. I think this is something that should be normalized in these discussions. We'd love to hear how you are, how leaders are talking to you about this, and how we can change this measure of human success.
Yeah, well, there you have a really deep question with many different many interconnection and interdependence. Yes, actually, I've been to Davos many years because I work at the corporate level for many years, and the World Economic Forum was one of our strategic partners. So I was actually helping to build the agenda every year from a knowledge point of view. And it's very interesting because when you are there, and this is the evolution of all these big forums where CEOs get together, normally when you get there, you talk about topics that are not super related to your growth and your business. You're talking about mega trends, climate change, yes, social impact, refugees. But you know, that's seen as an outsider. So it's so interesting to be with all these big leaders. And then when you talk about refugees, this is kind of the outsider of the conversation, because you know that among your shareholders and among your executive committee,
that's not what they're thinking about.
No, you're going to be talking about profit, and you're going to be talking about shareholder value, and you're going to be talking about double-digit growth, and something that we know is that when we humans create the rules of the game, then we have to play by the rules. So it's like you like soccer or football, you have rules. And then from a strategic point of view, you are going to maximize how you play by the book, how you play with those rules. Because if there is an offside, you cannot do offsides. If there is an incentive to do a triple in basketball, you are going to try to get 3 points instead of 2 or 1. So I think that basically what we have created as humanity is a system and different systems where we live, and we have to understand the rules. And right now we are living in a world where capitalism, with C, is the book. So everybody plays by the book, and somebody tries to maximize the rules, and somebody tries to, as in everything, be a bit greedy and go beyond and over. What you know as well is that at some point the game has to go on. And in this case, we are talking about the game of humans flourishing.
Yes.
Because that's the game. The game of humans in
100%.
the world is to flourish, is to be
Thrive.
joy and be happiness. Yeah. So then if the big game is about flourishing, joy and happiness, by serving others, which is a big idea that not many people really understand. Why are we part of this world? Well, we have to serve and we have to help others. Once you have a new vision of your game, then you change the rules, because those rules might not be helping you to flourish. So we've seen this in big forums, in small forums, in countries. The moment you give somebody something, what you said about ego jumps and you make it yourself, or you make it your own. So you own it. And this is the label that we have today with countries and with nations. I mean, the moment somebody wants to play in the international space, they have to own one country. Otherwise, you don't have a voice. Otherwise, you are in another bucket, which is the third sector, or you are into the institutions, so you are into somewhere else. But if you want to be playing hard with the big boys, you need a country. That's why we defend all these countries all the time, because that's the way you can really be represented in the book that we have created. So I think at some point, what we are learning is that we could be happier than we are today. And I don't like to compare, because something that we learn on all this happiness research is that there are three ways to be really unhappy. One is to compare, the other one is to compete, and the third one is to complain. So this is very profound as well, because it's not about competition. It's, imagine now telling companies not to compete.
Yeah.
Well, that's not part of why they exist, because in order to get more market share, they have to get that share from somebody. But we see as well that many companies and many sectors really collaborate. And actually between competition and cooperation and collaboration, there is one word that I love, is competition. So it's, I do cooperation and competition at the same time, but actually with a common goal. So I think that we are getting there. I think that there are global issues that can only be fixed at the global level. And when we think of that, and climate change is one of them, drugs, the way we eradicate poverty, water issues. There are so many issues. I mean, we have the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, that identify all the issues. This is the current world. But what about all the opportunities? I would love to have SDGs for opportunities, not for issues, because that's a different way to look at the world, from abundance, not from scarcity. So I think that the current system, the capitalist system, is built on scarcity, is built on the less of something, the premium you pay for it, and then you have to extract the maximum from everything and every system. And then when we look at nature, is the opposite. Nature tries to get to balance. Nature maximizes the interaction and the interconnections. Nature is synarchic. Synarchic, I love this word because it defines so well. It's like the human body. The human body works, and we don't even know how. We are exploring and we are learning, but it works. And your finger moves, and your eye sees things. Well, that's synarchic. And actually, nature and the world, and we humans in nature, are synarchic. What are we trying to do as humans? We are breaking a lot of nature rules, many. And that's why we have so many things going on today, because we disconnect from nature. I talk normally about three disconnections. We disconnect from nature, we disconnect from our communities and we are disconnecting from ourselves. And that's Happytalism, by the way. Happytalism is reconnection with nature, reconnection with a community, and reconnection with the self. So I think that I'm very optimistic, honestly, because we are part of nature, and nature always tends to balance. And that means that at some point right now, we are feeling so much pain everywhere in the world. We are going through collective trauma. Collective trauma, no time on earth, the whole world has gone through collective trauma as we are going now. And then it's not just COVID, it's the pandemic of loneliness, is small issues that are bringing us into suffering together. Well, you know, the only way we can get out from collective trauma is through collective healing. And that's why we need new paradigms. And those new paradigms are not going to be imposed. Those new paradigms are going to be evolving as nature in a balanced way. And at some point, we'll see this happening in one community that are going to be using time banks, exchanging time instead of money. We are going to be seeing this in communities that really use pro-social activities in order to maximize how everybody's flourishing. We are going to be making sense of the common good. We are going to be more conscious from a capitalism point of view. But all this is going to bring us into, I feel, a world that is not dystopic. It's going to be much more balanced. And the only question I have, who's going to be seeing that? Because right now is probably not everybody in the world. I think that we are going to go through so much struggle that we are going to lose a lot of people in the way. But those who get to that point, I think they're going to be seeing how humanity can live in connection with nature, with ourselves and everybody else.
I love what you said. It's the first time I've heard that juxtaposition between nature and the free market capitalism. It's beautiful. This idea that we are in this economy that is a zero-sum game, right? And that is in contrast to happiness, and they can't work together because happiness requires, as you said, no competition or less competition. It would all work too better if the earnings we made from our free market economy were invested in mental well-being, resources for mental well-being. And I see that too as kind of the next evolution in what you're talking about. More of our earnings will go into that. And I think that will help as well. I also get to thinking of the micro level. We're so involved right now in personal growth, personal development. We have targets and goals for ourselves personally. We put a lot of pressure on personal success, right? And at the same time, consumerism, which goes hand in hand with what we're talking about, the free market, capitalism, that also puts all of us in this constant state of craving the future, craving for the future, and this idea of I will be happy when. And we talked about this earlier. And that is something that we need to wake up to as well, that our current system is keeping us always in the future, keeping us unhappy now. And we know that happiness can only be found in the present. And it's hard for people who, for example, might not have experienced meditation or who find it just hard to be, quite frankly, in the present moment. I'd love to hear from you how you personally try to stay present during, I'm sure, very busy days and a life of so much purpose that requires you to do what you do every day. How do you try to stay present?
Yes, and I think that being present is probably one of the solutions to anything going on in the world today. I mean, we might think that we need drastic change, but actually the only thing we need is personal change. That's it. That's why I'm super optimistic, because if we want to our goal is to get to 10 billion happy by 2050, because that's more or less the number of people that are going to be living in the planet by that time. It's a report from the United Nations. If it's 8 billion, 11, whatever. But I think I'm super optimistic, because the only thing it takes is that each of us focus on ourselves. It might look, or it might sound a bit selfish, but it's the opposite. It's actually the beginning of every fundamental change starts with self-compassion. And when we love each other, that's fantastic. But before we get into that, we have to love ourselves. So loving ourselves, self-acceptance and self-compassion is the first step. So with that in mind, that's going to bring you presence, because you understand your weakness, your strengths, and you accept them. And then you adapt. You accept and adapt. So when you are accepting and adapting, this is the way where we can be evolving in a really healthy way everywhere in the world. This works for every human being. So in order to get into self-love, into self-compassion, into presence, in order to share that, well, there are different ways. And I think that depending on your degree of consciousness, then you can use meditation and go deep into higher states of meditation if you know how to do it, or you can use mantras, or you can use actually yoga, sports, talking to people, focusing. The other day I met a runner. He runs 2 marathons every day. That's like, I mean, that's impossible. And we were talking about how he is present during the marathons, and it's amazing because the whole time he's in a state of meditation when he's running. So meditation is not just sitting and freeing your mind from thoughts. No, it's actually getting into the state that connects you to your core, and the core is yourself anyway. So it's just feeling that you are connected and not distracted by thoughts that you are aware that they exist. But then there is another technique, which is contemplation, and for me it's even easier than meditation. Contemplation is basically focusing with an active mind on things and see how they evolve. And this is what you mentioned about the observer. This is the concept of becoming an observer and then waiting for a moment where there is a breakthrough. And there is always something. When you're observing, sometimes you realize the different color, different shape, you see something that is melted with the rest of your awareness, and then you merge that with your action. So actually contemplation is beautiful and is one of the techniques that is very effective even before meditation. And then even before contemplation, there is one that is super used in sports, which is concentration. So you focus and you concentrate on things, and then as you focus, you start relaxing. So being present, first, in order to be present, you really have to be aware that you are or you are not present. In order to be aware, you have to get into a state with a specific energy where you know. And that's how we can work. And that's how we can work through so many different techniques. I love Jeffrey Martin is a researcher that actually he interviewed thousands of luminaries, people who actually got to a higher state of awareness or alignment. And from those conversations, he came out with 26 super tangible techniques in order to get to a state of fundamental well-being. And then I evolved this into fundamental peace. But right now, the good news is that there is quite a lot. There is quite a lot. If we want to have techniques based on science, we have. If we want techniques based on more or on spirituality, we have. If we want something that is more aligned to our lifestyle with sports, there are techniques. So right now we are abundant in so many ways. So for me, it's just picking some of those techniques and applying them.
It's beautiful. Especially this idea that meditation can be in sport and and we've seen athletes talk about this all the time. They call it being in the zone. Emma Raducanu, actually, who just won the US Open, 18 years old, to me, she is a great example of being in that present moment, not worrying about what people are saying in the stands. And she kind of embodied that, didn't she? I was thinking too, in the line of work that we're in, a lot of people tend to see it a little bit as not applying to themselves. And let me put it this way, people who might not be suffering, who don't need to go to a therapist or a psychotherapy, who think that they're okay, they go through life kind of in this mode of living, but not thriving, but not realizing they're not thriving. And so many of my former colleagues on Wall Street, people I've worked with for so many years, might never get the opportunity to really understand that there's more to their life if they could simply stay present, if they could tap into that ability to be. What can you say to people who might not be struggling, but at the same time are unaware that their potential has not been reached?
Yeah, this is a great question, and for those of you listening who like skiing, you will understand very quickly. Because imagine you don't know how to ski, you go to the mountains, and let's choose Colorado. You go to Vail, Keystone, A Basin, whatever, and you go to the mountain with your skis. That's life. At some point in life, you're gonna be in a mountain. Well, you get the skis, and then you have to go down. Well, that's pretty scary. And that's life as well. It's pretty scary because suddenly you're moving. And you know, humanity is moving all the time because planet Earth is moving. So we are already moving. And we have the inertia and we have the momentum. And then somebody's gonna come to you and push you in one way, in one direction. Imagine you don't know how to use your skis. It's like, I mean, what is gonna happen? If you're lucky, at some point you're gonna get down. You don't know how you're gonna get down, but you're gonna get down. But if you are not that lucky, you might have an injury, and that injury might be stopping you from doing many other things. So what do you normally do when you go to a mountain and you want to practice ski? Well, you get a teacher, you get a coach. That's the first thing you do. You don't wait a second. I mean, you don't wait to get harmed and to get an injury to get a coach. And the coach knows. And the coach, the first thing he's gonna show you is, one thing is how to brake. And actually, when you know it, so easy, you don't even think. But basically, you have to put your skis in the right way, in the right direction. And the second is, how do you stand when you fall down? So those are the two things that you learn first. How you stand up when you are down in the floor and how you brake. So I think that analogy works very well for our life. I think that we are skiing this life and we don't have a clue how to brake, and we struggle to stand up when we fall down. And then we have all these skiers around us that don't have a clue about skiing. So imagine, but it's a playground. Why? Right? Because when you go skiing, you are going because you want to have fun and you're in nature. But actually, you transform a potentially amazing experience into a nightmare. I mean, I know so many people who tried skiing and never went back.
Yeah.
Well, that's life, because life is a nightmare for many people. I mean, keep in mind that the US, 22 veterans kill themselves every day.
Wow.
Okay, so we are talking about big numbers. We are talking about playing in a playground, because life is a stage, life is a playground. We are all playing, and some of us are harming many other people because we don't know how to stand, because we don't know how to brake. So I think that would be my recommendation for everybody. At some point, go to the mountains and start learning skiing. It's the same as diving. diving is another sport. And I love another analogy of diving. What do you do underwater when you have an issue? Well, few people know how to answer this, because normally everybody thinks, oh, I have an issue, I have to do something, I have to move. Well, actually, the first thing you do when you are diving and you have an issue is you stop. And the second thing you do is you breathe. Stop, breathe. Stop, breathe. Then you think, and then you act. But there are 2 stages before you act. I mean, 3 is that you stop, you breathe, you think. If we combine skiing with diving, I think that that's all we need for a flourishing life.
I love it. I know that you've been an executive in the business world marketing for many, many years. I think people would love to hear your story on your journey to this point in time, any inflection points or points in your life that helped guide you to this purpose.
Yes, well, you're right. I've been at the corporate level for so many years with top executive positions. But before that, and that's why now probably I'm going back to my path, to my origins. I was an international observer with the United Nations in post-armed conflicts. You know, you have a war, civil war, then you have elections. You send a number of observers as well, because you know something that you realize when you're an observer, that you are changing the reality. Because as you observe, people are not going to do something that they might be doing. So this is interesting because it's not just quantum physics, it's real life. So international observers actually make sure that you have a smooth process into democracy and elections are fair. So that really opened my eye, because I did that right after I finished my master's, my MA in peace studies. So I've been always into the roots of conflict and the roots of peace. So how can it be that people cannot solve conflicts unless they get into war or violence or fight? And how other people are completely avoiding this all the time? And how do you regenerate justice and trust after conflict? So that was part of my journey. And before that, I was a sports coach for all my life. I mean, for 20 years. And when you're a sports coach, you are always thinking about the team, how you can maximize the power of the team, but you can only do that by focusing at the individual level and strengthening the positive of each of the players. So you understand what the strengths are, and then you combine the team in order to maximize impact. So I think that with that experience of team building and personal development in order to achieve the maximum from a performance point of view, and then you get into conflicts, and then you get into corporate, I think that my natural stage was, okay, how do we combine all these dots? Because the world is interconnected, and 50% of the wealth in the world is managed by countries, and 50% of the wealth in the world is managed by companies. So when you understand that, you say, okay, who are the leaders who are running the world? Who are from a country point of view, who are the leaders running the world from a corporate point of view? And then in the middle, there are so many millions. There are more than 2 million non-for-profits going and doing things for good. But they fight for resources. But they are always trying to get more resources to do more impact. But they forget that at some point, maybe you don't have to be too big to make more impact. What you have to do is to be smart and to interconnect other players. So I think that we are now in a moment where we need more interconnection in the world, where we need more, less ego, as you say, and more, be more humble. We need everybody maximizing their strengths. And this is my new journey. My new journey now, it's been more than 7-8 years, is like, okay, how can we create or just observe a synarchic system in the world that is going to be working regardless towards the common good. But I think that I'm very, now looking back, I'm super empowered. I feel empowered when I see that, of course, I understand the CEO language because I've been there, and I understand the power players, and I understand the country dynamics because I've been there. And I understand then that the only way for two fundamental peace is inner understanding. So that's why I think that now I go all in for inner peace. That's the space where I think that we can evolve, we can understand, but then we have to understand the levers. And that's why freedom, consciousness, and happiness are the key for inner peace from my point of view. There are many other ways, but those three work. And we've seen it from spirituality, we've seen this from science. I like to connect both all the time. And that's why I'm super optimistic, because I feel comfortable now with different playgrounds. And I feel that now the World Happiness Foundation is completely ready to maximize this synarchic system that we talk about.
It's beautiful. I from your talking, it really recalls this idea of spiritual intelligence and emotional intelligence. We all talk about EQ and IQ, but there's also SQ, spiritual intelligence. And you just brought up this contrast between spirituality and science. They've been at odds for a long time. The science, the academics think spirituality doesn't really matter or is woo-woo, and the spirituality thinks the science doesn't really have that level of enlightenment. And now we see quantum physics now trying to bring these two worlds together. And I think it's fascinating. And I think that this optimism you keep bringing up, I think it's so important for us to be optimistic. Thank you so much for keep bringing this up, because quantum physics is that next level where we can finally bridge the gap that we've had since the Middle Ages, since religious beliefs have been telling us that science doesn't count or doesn't matter. And then that with the scientific revolution, turning that on its head and saying, no, religion isn't giving us the answers. So we have come to this beautiful place now in humanity and in history where we can finally connect these two grand, very important needs for humanity's flourishing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. But in this case, at least the way I like to frame things is a playground. So we are living on a playground, it's a stage. That's why we make so many mistakes as humanity, because we are playing, we are trying things all the time. Sometimes they are based on good values, sometimes they are based on fear. That's why we make many mistakes, but that's why we evolve so fast. I think that something important for all of us is not to believe. And I'm sorry, because this might be incongruent for some people, but I mean, right now we know about quantum physics because we know it. But what are we gonna know in 20 years? We don't know. CRISPR and the whole technology behind how we change our genes. I mean, we didn't have that technology a few years ago, and now we are able to have a vaccine for COVID in 24 hours. We don't even see the gene, I mean, the virus, and we do this digitally coming from China to Australia to the US. It's like, so I feel that, and this is why science and spirituality haven't looked at each other a lot, because they are very dogmatic. Both of them are dogmatic. In science, you have a method, and in spirituality, people misunderstand spirituality with believing. So when you believe in something, you attach. When you attach and you go to the next level, you build your identity around your belief. The moment you build your identity around your belief, then you can kill for it, because you have to defend yourself. That's why people fight on traffic lights. That's why people have the flag of the country as their unique identity. That's why we have hooligans supporting football teams, and they are so blind that they can hit anybody on the streets with a couple of things. So I think that my recommendation for everybody is to stop believing. Is really being. And this is difficult, because what is be? What is it? What is that's it, is nothing. Is all and everything. So one of my recommendations in order to clean and to be aware is that probably we should stop believing a bit, to get into a point of so raw that then we can build from that rawness. So not easy, but that's why we have silent retreats. That's why we have all these journeys of discovery, connection, and self-development. But I feel that the more people who don't believe, the better for the world.
Yes, and the point that we're getting at too is religion and spirituality are different, and I think people sometimes confuse that, and they think they're the same. They're completely different, and your idea of being is on the spiritual side, versus the believing, which is more on the religious side. Thank you, Lou, so much for being here. And this has been a fantastic conversation. I want to end by a call to action for people to help your vision, to the World Happiness Foundation, the World Happiness Fest. How can we get more people involved with what you're doing to spread awareness of happytalism, of these words that we're talking about: freedom, consciousness, happiness? You have a beautiful quote that I want to read here. Don't expect many things in the world to change if you don't change yourself. And we were talking about that just earlier, that it all starts from us. What can some people do right now to, other than obviously go to your website, look you up and get involved with the next year's Happiness Foundation? What else can we say?
Well, I think that, of course, is worldhappiness.foundation. That's a website, but I feel that we have to be of service. So my recommendation is just pick one cause, one person, and help them. That's it. The moment we start giving, the moment we help somebody, we are helping ourselves. So if there is one only thing that you have to do, is just do something for somebody else. That's it. And in the meantime, love yourself and learn how to love yourself. Because when we combine both, I mean, we are unstoppable as humanity. So that's it. And of course, join our festivals. They are free. They are hybrid, online and live. March is going to be amazing, because we are going to have many live events around the world during the week of Happiness Day, March 20th. So yes, I recommend you all basically being, and in order to become a happytalist, just go and help somebody.
I love it. Lou, thank you so much again. For more on how to find calm and freedom in a fast-paced world, hit the subscribe button below. And please share this wisdom with someone you love.